Well, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this, one of the breakout sessions this afternoon, future-proofing your farming business through people. I will yet again make the call that Andrew did around the app. This afternoon is going to be interactive, and there will be opportunities to use the app to ask questions, which I'll come on to, but there's also the opportunity for us to use the app to ask you questions, which Andrew will touch on in his section. So, my name's Terry Jones. I'm Director General of the NFU, and I have to say it's a great privilege to lead the permanent executive, the staff of the organisation, and our people are very important. We have a 5-year plan, or a 2,000 days plan within the NFU at the moment to build resilience within the organisation to I suppose, deal with whatever is thrown at us in the future. And it looks at our finances, the structure of the organisation, the culture that we want to embed within the NFU. But critically, it also takes full account of our needs when it comes to people in the future. And that would be, I'm sure, as true in your businesses. We want to develop our people and create a pipeline of talent, and I'm sure you're the same. And speaking personally, I get a real kick out of seeing our people come through the business, and particularly we've got an outstanding graduate programme where we very quickly empower people and bring them through into senior positions in the business. And this is really important because, as you'll have heard this morning, there's so much change out there, politically, but also technologically and economically, and we've got a huge amount being thrown at us as people that run businesses today. People are important, but skilled and talented people are indispensable, and so it's quite right that we're talking about this. If we're going to tackle those big changes that are being thrown at us. So we'll look at future-proofing the business, how we might engage new entrants, maybe touch on changing farm structures for succession, and also take into some of those key considerations when it comes to exiting a business as well. In terms of the structure, we will in a second hear from each of our panellists in turn. We'll then have a bit of a discussion amongst the panellists on some of the themes that have come up, and then we're really going to open this up to the floor, and hopefully I can pull some of you out of the audience to ask questions and to make points as well. To help within that, as I said, we will be using the app, and I have an iPad on the table there, which questions will be sent through to me from what you've put on the app. I'm slightly trepidatious at that prospect, not least because I'm not great with technology, but also I'll never forget seeing Jay Rayner interviewed at the Abergavenny Food Festival, and this technology was employed, and the first question that came up was, or the point that was made was, keep him talking, I'm off to burgle his hotel room. So please don't do that. Right, so when you hear from our experts, you will hear stories of succession, the highs and the lows and the pitfalls. We'll hear from experts in their field who begin these discussions on succession and pull together what can often be I suppose difficult topics together, and getting people to think about some of the things that they need to think about, but perhaps are unwilling to do. Now I'm going to introduce each of our speakers in turn as they come up, but I suppose just a few last reflections before we set sail. I think you will probably, having spoken to our speakers, you'll hear some quite personal stories as we go through. But this isn't an exact science, is it? We've all got different stories when it comes to handing over farming businesses and the speed at which that happens and how those conversations go. Even within my own family, and I suppose it was the reason why I was so keen to chair today's discussion on my wife's side of the family, and that's been a very painless discussion, and they very quickly worked out about how that business is going to be taken forward. In my own family, it's been a much harder discussion for us to begin, but we've now begun it, and my brother and I and my parents are beginning to get to that place. So I took a real interest when I saw that this was on the agenda, and the opportunity to chair this today was really too great to miss. So you're going to hear all sorts of different perspectives, all sorts of different stories. But to get the best out of today, be prepared to engage, be prepared to learn from what others say today. And as an old mentor of mine once said to me, and remember that minds are like parachutes, they function best when they are open. So with that, I will hand over to our first speaker, the NFU's chief economist, Andrew Francis, who started with the NFU in NFU Sugar, but now heads up our economics team. So, Andrew, over to you.
As Terry's just said, and as we've heard this morning from the various speakers, there's a lot of uncertainty in farming at the minute. For a start, we don't know what the context is in terms of Brexit. We don't know what that trade deal is going to be. We don't know about the certainty around Labour, and we don't know. And I think we really do need some certainty on that. But also, we've got the agriculture bill going through Parliament as well, and we don't really know fundamentally what some of those details around the agriculture bill are. But we do know that direct payments are going to be reduced from 2021. So clearly, there are lots of challenges facing agriculture, but at the same time, there will be, there will be opportunities. And as I've put on this slide, there's going to be opportunities to improve productivity, to embrace agri-tech, to embrace new ideas, and certainly to improve business resilience. And as part of that, I think we need to start discussing and start thinking about what the best mechanism and the best support is for those who want to enter the industry and also for those who want to leave. And I guess that's why, one of the reasons why we're having this session today. And in terms of succession planning, the NFU sees this as a critical area of focus. And I've put on here, we've got, as Andrea Graham mentioned in the Future of Farming Report 2040, it talks about succession in there. It talks about how farming may change. There might be more contract farming and share farming arrangements, for example. The business guide, NFU business guide, you've all got one. If you haven't, there's some more at the front. Is a guide on succession that the NFU has put together. And then, of course, we also have our forums. We've got the Next Generation Forum, which is all about new entrants and younger farmers. And then we've got the NFU Tenants Forum, and, of course, the various commodity industry forums that are all talking about this subject. So my final slide here is, so what are we going to try and get out of this session? Why are we here? Well, as Terry said, we're talking about the whole pipeline around business succession, from the new entrant coming into the industry, from the established farmer who perhaps ultimately wants to leave or is looking to retire. And we've got an excellent panel. We've got farmers and we've got professionals. We've got representatives from NFU Mutual. We've got a professional mediator who are very, very experienced in this area. So that's the context, and I'd like to now go on to asking these questions on the app, and let's hope it works. I know. So hopefully it's going to come up on the screen. It's the first question. So the question is, do you have a succession plan in place? Yes or no? So please vote or answer now. So 63% of you are saying no, and that actually aligns with some research that NFU Mutual have done that came up with the conclusion from their research that 60% of farmers don't have a succession plan in place. So that does align with that. But it is good to see that well over a third of you are talking and are thinking about this very issue. Can I have the next question, please? So what are the main challenges in developing a succession plan? And there's various options there. So it's a difficult area to discuss with the family, or is it no suitable successor, ownership structure and tax implications? Is it too complicated, lack of guidance or professional support, unsuitable retirement options, or other? Please vote now. I think that's pretty conclusive. 62% of you are saying that this is because it's a difficult area to discuss with your family. And I think it'd be really useful this afternoon to hear about some of your experiences that you've had around that area. So thank you for that one. And then our third question, please. When do you see succession becoming a priority for your business? Is it now, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, or 10 years plus? Please vote now. Well, quite a mix, but a third of you are saying that you should be looking at it now. Absolutely. You know, succession planning is a process that really everyone should be thinking about now, and this is why we're having this session today. It's something that's going to be an evolving process over the years, and I guess the sooner that you look at that, the sooner you start thinking about it, the better. And then the final question, please. Where would you go to find guidance on succession planning? Would it be a solicitor, an accountant, a consultant or family mediator, the NFU, NFU Mutual, a bank, or a land agent? No, I think it's just one, I think. Thank you. So the winner, or the one ahead, is an accountant. I think the disparity, the variation in that answer just shows that there are lots of avenues of which you're exploring. And we've got our business guide that the NFU's put together that does explore the various options and the various professionals that you can contact to talk about succession. So I hope that was useful just to give you an idea and some context about today's discussion. Thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you very much. Now, after that quick scene setter, we've now got James Small, who is a farmer. He's part of a family farm business in Somerset. He's a third generation farmer and married with 2 children, farming just under 500 hectares of owned and tenanted land under a variety of agreements. And he's got 1,400 sheep and a closed herd of 120 spring calving suckler cows. And I understand, James, you also run a very successful glamping business, so got fingers in many pies. So, James, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Right, well, thank you, Terry, and welcome everyone this afternoon. It's lovely to see so many of you in here, and obviously it's a subject very close to many people's hearts. Okay, so we've had the background of my farm. What we didn't say in that was that in 1981, my grandfather passed away, and he had a really simple will. Very simple. 2 pages. 2 sides even, A4. But it did take us 30 years to sort that out. Deed of variation had to be made, and unfortunately we had to wait for a family member to pass away before we were able to sort that. That takes us up into the just sort of 2010 or so. By that point, I've been brought into the family farm. I'm a partner in the business, married, 2 children at that point, and my father-in-law is an ex-solicitor. Now, apologies to any solicitors in the audience here, but generally I find solicitors tend to look on the negative side of life. They tend to be rather glass half empty. So from my father-in-law's point of view, not only was I going to suffer a terrible car crash, but probably his daughter was going to be in there as well, and what's going to happen to the 2 children? And it did actually spark a bit of thought. It made Kate and I look at one another and think, yeah, actually, what does happen there? So we wanted to get something sorted with our wills, with regards to transference of assets, to ensure our children were going to be taken care of, and ensure guardianship as well, who was going to look after them legally. But this sparked a bigger question. What is our estate? Because we make a will, what happens after we've made that will? Because things might happen. Was I going to receive an inheritance from my parents or other business partners? To be honest, you know, we can assume things, but we didn't actually know. So it motivated us to actually try and bring everyone together to have a conversation around this. And at this point, there was 5 of us in the partnership. So it was an uncle and auntie, mother and father, and myself. Now, you might think that's all very simple. It's very easy. You're a close family. You're going to talk about this, no problems. It's not. It's not easy to talk about these sorts of things because actually you're talking about either them leaving the business or what happens when they die, and no one really wants to talk about that. The way we got around it, structured it, was to say, actually, this is what happens if I was to pass away. And that opened up the conversation. because it made them have to think about it. You know, if we are in business and the idea of this is to pass it on to future family generations, how are we going to ensure that? How are we going to keep it together? So that was great, opened up the conversations, got everyone thinking, but don't think that this was a speedy thing. It took around 2 years, actually, to get everyone into a good place. We looked at it, and actually, we didn't take any third-party help in mediation with this. We were able to solve it, or remedy it ourselves fairly well. But once we knew what we wanted to achieve, that's when we then went and sought the professional advice. That's when we then went to the accountant and to the solicitor, and we got them into the same room and said, this is what we want. How do we get there? And the tax consideration was a distinctly secondary consideration to ensuring that everyone's wishes were happy. I've just seen too many farm businesses have problems with family members where things are assumed, someone thought something, or it wasn't what they expected. So we had to ensure that we were all, as the saying goes, all on the same page. One of the side effects of this actually caused us to have a really good look at the business, because obviously if we're going to put things into transference of assets or understanding where partners are to, you need to know who owns what. And actually, people didn't own exactly what they thought they owned, and ownership was different to what they thought it was. And so we had to have a really big tidying up exercise. And one of the interesting things thrown up was around AHA tenancies. So we hold an AHA tenancy on around 100 acres, and actually that wasn't what we expected it to be. I'm not a natural successor. Should my father pass away before my uncle, then it's not an automatic succession within the business. So that's something we've had to look at as well. Sadly, 2 years ago, one of my business partners passed away. And we were able, because of the planning that had been done, it was a relatively painless transference. Everything was sorted relatively easily. But it still took over a year. But because of that planning, you know, we didn't have the problem of trying to retrospectively sort something alongside the grief that is suffered. And you can't underestimate that. Within a family business, not only do you lose a family member, you also have a problem to sort out with regards to the business. And because of that planning, we were able to have that in place, and we were able to go through it as seamlessly as possible under the circumstances. We're now looking at the next phase of planning. It's whether to bring my wife into the partnership. It's a big discussion at the moment within the family. It's a big discussion because she's not entirely certain she wants to come into it. She sort of does, but she's looking at the debt that we got, and she's not entirely certain she wants responsibility for it. I'm trying to persuade her that it's a really good thing. But we're working on it, and we're just trying to you know, get the ins and outs of that, and we'll be going back to professional advice with it. I will say, nothing that you do will be cheap. It did cost us quite a bit of money to sort out, but it was significantly less than if we were trying to do stuff retrospectively. But that's why I think it's important to have a clear idea what all partners and everyone in business wants to do before you go start seeking the advice and start to put in the instructions. We weren't quite 5 figures to sort it out, but we were very nearly 5 figures just to put the simple plan into place. But that's far less than what it would have been otherwise. So the tips that I would just like to leave you with is to be clear of what you want and understand what others want. That was one of the big things we had. It was a listening exercise. It wasn't just about what I wanted. I had to understand what my older partners wanted, what their aspirations were, what they wanted to achieve. As the saying goes, it's 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that order. And from a younger point of view, what I was bringing into it was that I just considered that time is the greatest asset that I have. And I didn't want to spend 30 years working in a business if it wasn't actually the desire for that business to be able to continue with me in the future. That's fine, it might work there, but then I would treat it very differently than if there's an expectation of transference and what we can do. Don't be afraid to spend the money. You are going to have to at some point. You can't get away from it. If you need third-party help, get it. It is absolutely worth it. And the main one with it really is to continue to review. Once you have a plan in place, it is not static. It will not stay still. Circumstances change, people change, ambitions change. So you need to just keep reviewing it, keep it live, and make sure that everyone understands it and that you're all on the same page and you're heading towards the same direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much.